So just to recap, we were speaking about the four worlds now. That was the big idea that we transitioned to, how the highest world has no evil whatsoever. And this low world, the world that we're in right now, which is also called Olam Asiyah, the world of action, has mostly evil and a little bit of good. Now, when we say mostly evil, we're not saying that it's mostly evil. After all, it's created by God, but it's covered mostly by evil. And our duty, in a way, is to uncover the goodness within the evil, if possible. Some evil is what's called a shalosh klipot atmeot, the three impure peels, the literal translation. Some evil will only be, abolished when Mashiach will come. And things, for example, that are not redeemable in this world. But a lot of it can be redeemable. But the idea, again, is that most of this world is full of klipa and sitra achra, as he calls it, which is literally means the peel and the other side, or the peel, again, that needs to be peeled to redeem the evil, or the other side sometimes simply can't be redeemed. And a little bit of this world is good. So that was the latest idea. Let's continue here at the bottom of page 168. Does anyone want to read? You want?
Right.
Please, go for it. Thank you.
Okay. Therefore, all affairs of this world are severe and evil, and wicked men prevail, as explained in Eitz Chaim, Portal 42, the end of chapter 4. The nature of the physical reality and the harshness of life in its realm is a problem that has occupied many thinkers and theologians. Here, the Tanya quotes the conception expressed in the Kabbalistic work Eitz Chaim, whose general view of our world seems one of hardened realism, even pessimism. Ours is a world characterized by an almost total concealment of the divine, a world whose visible components are overwhelmingly klipa and sitra achra. Small wonder that it is not filled with brightness and light. In a world that is basically klipa, evil has the natural advantage and the wicked prevail. But this picture is not necessarily pessimistic because things can be put right. There is a way to change and transform the world, to fill it with goodness and holiness. But this does not come automatically. It requires diligent and constant work of change and correction. No.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what he's referring to, I mean, it is indeed a matter of philosophical discussion. I know that the German philosopher Leibniz would say that this world is the best of all possible worlds. The French philosopher in his times, more or less 1700, Voltaire, would say that it's the worst of all possible worlds. Right? Now, we agree more with Voltaire than with Leibniz. Judaism and Kabbalah says that this is the worst of all possible worlds, yet there is still hope, as Rabbi Steinsaltz would put it. What does it mean that there's still hope? That means that we can, even though it is the worst of possible world, we still have the ability to elevate it, to make it higher, and to better it in a way that when we conclude this collective act of betterment, everyone does his part, then we'll be able to bring the world to the highest level of all, to make it higher than the highest of worlds. Because then Mashiach will come and God will draw down his presence to dwell in this world, and then it will be the highest of worlds. But for now, it's the worst of all possible worlds, like Voltaire says, and it's our job to make this worst, to work on this worst possible world, and make it better and better and better, and elevate it until it'll be completely elevated. But that's really the idea. Now, I think just to speak a little bit about this, I think that that's the general mission. Everyone has their own. We've spoken about this, but everyone has their own specific mission of why they came down to this world, why their soul was sent here. But the general mission, if there could be such a mission that's very collective and general, is that we better this world. Instead of focusing inwards, it's not that we don't need to focus inwards from time to time, but instead of focusing inwards, we need to focus outwards and ensure that we ask the question of not what I want, but what does the world want from me? And now, of course, everyone is their own part of the world and their own part of life altogether to elevate. But the question is really posed through this big philosophical argument that we have to make this world the best of all worlds, even though right now it's the worst of all worlds. Rabbi Eisen, did you want to say something? Please, yeah.
I have a question. The best of possible worlds, the worst of possible worlds. Is it the only possible world?
Oh, that's a difference. Right. Good point. Some would say that, yes, that this is the only world. At least Voltaire was an atheist, but he still believed that there are multiple worlds.
I think the typical Jewish response would be, they're both right.
Right, in a way, you're right. It does say, right, that they're both right, because it is the worst, but it could be the best. So they both
That's
right.
Charles Dickens.
Yeah.
That's the times and the worst of times.
That's it. Exactly. Right. Yeah, but you're right, Rabbi Eisen. I mean, there are opinions that say that this is the only world, and then we're doomed. But
well, that's the question, are we? Or if it's the only world, then it impacts on our role and the immediacy and urgency of a response.
right.
If it's only one of many, then okay, who cares? Because if it doesn't happen here, it'll happen somewhere else, and it's out of our hands.
Yes and no. I'm speaking of it being the fourth world in Judaism, right, or the world of action, and the idea that there are other worlds means that there's still room for growth, that we have a lot to do in order to transform this world into a type of world that exists in the upper world. So we have some comparison and some aspiration to reach. In addition to that, I think that the fact that there is another world, maybe not speaking about the other worlds of formation and creation and emanation, but really the idea that altogether that there's this world and that there's the world to come, is an idea that makes us more accountable. If indeed one day we'll face a judge, God himself, who will ask us about every action in this world, it makes us accountable. If this world is the only world there is, then who cares? It's almost like last week's parsha. Let's do whatever we want. There's no accountability. There's no other world. We're here. This is our only chance. Carpe diem, as they would say. Live the moment. And that's it. What matters, they come and go. So I think the idea that there are other worlds, in a way, makes us much, much more accountable. Ronnie, I know you have your hands up now. Yeah.
So listening to what's been said, first, is this the only world? In this moment in time, it is, but time moves forward. And as we've talked about, do I plant the apple seed now, and I won't be alive to bear to get value from the fruit, but I need to plant the seed now for the next generation, the next generation. So if we just look at it from just a moment in time, then this is the only world. But if we can look at it from an expansive way of looking at it, not looking at it from our own self, what is in it for me, but to look for a future. And I think that's what's important.
No, very well said. Very well said. It evokes the line in the Talmud that's become very famous. This one is for sure in Ta'anit. Last week I said that one of the lines we spoke about was in Chagiga, but it was in Ta'anit. This line is for sure in Ta'anit, in the tractate of Ta'anit. It says that just as our grandfathers planted for us, we have to plant for our grandchildren. So you're right. By looking at it in the dimension of time, then we do have responsibilities too, not just in the dimension of world, but in the dimension of time.
And in doing so, and knowing that we're purposely doing it, we connect with God, and God connects with us. That's our goal. That's our what we want to have in our life. And in doing that, we can be fulfilled and feel joy,
That's right.
even with all the evil.
That's right. Yeah, but that would exclude people who don't have. You're right. Fine. Not
Yeah,
gonna go-
I hear you. I
Yeah,
hear you.
yeah. No, but that's fine. That's a good point. Yeah. Now, so again, so Rabbi Schnauz's point here in his commentary is that saying that this world is the worst of all worlds in which there is still hope, it doesn't mean to fill us, he doesn't mean, or Kabbalah or Judaism, doesn't mean to fill us with pessimism. What it means to do is to give us that weight of responsibility. If it is the worst of all worlds, then there's a lot of work to do. Then we can't be resting on our laurels. Then we have to get to work and better our part of the world, as we said before. So it's not there, God forbid, to depress us, but it's there really to awaken us to the responsibility we each have. Every generation has its own responsibility of elevating the world yet to the next level. And although sometimes we don't see that progress of work from generation to generation, it seems quite the opposite, that the world is only getting worse, not getting better. We have the Midrash that encourages us with this metaphor of dwarfs on giants' shoulders, that we may be dwarfs. Our generation may be a dwarf generation spiritually, but we are still standing on giants' shoulders. And they did a lot of the work for us already. Yes, we're lesser than others in previous generation, but we're almost there. We're almost getting to that top. So dare we not pause or rest on our laurels, as mentioned, and continue the work to transform this world from the worst of all worlds to the best of all worlds, because there's hope that we can do that, and there's almost reassurance that we can do that, and we should do that. So
Rabbi,
yes,
there's lots of people doing good things in the world. You
Right.
can really see it when you have problems.
I know.
And I think that the sad thing is that that's not what's in the newspapers. That's not what you're seeing. That's not, but there are people that are really good people
Right. No,
right
very
now
well said.
today. Mhm.
Yeah, like you said, unfortunately, the media is showering us with everything that's not good. But you're right. All right. I mean, we have to believe that all these good deeds that are done by so many good people are really adding to the shoulders of our giants, and will eventually transform this world from the worst to the best. You know, just the idea, Voltaire, as mentioned, said this was the worst of all worlds. He himself was an atheist. I remember living in Geneva and visiting that house. Voltaire died in this specific house in Geneva. It's famous because Voltaire lived in it and died in it. And if you visit it today, do you know what that house is? Now, he was a complete atheist. This house became the office for the Bible Society of Geneva. This is he didn't believe in the Bible. And he died in that house. And this house is transformed into the Bible Society. So I'm saying to myself, you see, he may have thought that this is the worst of all worlds, and he was an atheist and believed in God. What a pessimistic worldview. But eventually there's hope. Rabbi Stans was right. There is hope. Look, even his house is turned into the Bible Society.
Voltaire was also a very big anti-Semite.
I know. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Leibniz probably was. I mean, it was cool to be an anti-Semite back in the day also. Yeah. He wrote terrible things. And he wasn't the only one. I mean, there are many other famous writers and philosophers, even Shakespeare. I don't know how big of a Jew lover Shakespeare was.
No.
After he wrote The Merchant of Venice, for example. But anyhow, we won't go there. Okay. All right, any other comments or questions, disagreements? Otherwise, we can continue.
I would just add that we're fortunate that we have the promise of the rainbow from Hashem, because it's I don't think it's a coincidence reading about this tendency towards evil after the parsha of of yesterday, and just how, the world was destroyed because of evil, and yet the recognition that the tendency was toward evil led to the promise of our world not being destroyed again. Because I think that if that promise had not been made, when we look back in our history at things, there might have been another flood or two or three.
Right. No, yeah, you never know. You're right. It was also God's recognition that Yetzer Lev Adam Ra min Orav, that everyone is born with an evil inclination, right? After he gave us the sign of the rainbow, God says, okay, fine, I'll recognize that you have another side to you. And therefore, I'll understand if evil prevails from time to time, because you each have an evil inclination. Just focus on your good inclination instead of your evil inclination. But there's that recognition. And I think that it also brought this new reality of consciousness to the world when God said that we each have a little bit of evil inside. It's to me, it's really disheartening. And I think that's why, for example, the Lubavitcher Rebbe pushed so much to have a moment of silence in all public schools in the country at the beginning of the day, in order for people to be aware that there might be a greater authority that they're accountable to. But I think that it's really disheartening that many people speak about, as we speak about bettering the world, and that's really the general mission. But we also sometimes forget that there's a world right here to better first. Mm-hmm. And if we can conquer this world, that will be much easier and also much more effective. Our work would be much more effective in bettering the world. We speak about fighting bigotry and racism and sexism and everything else. What about fighting the evil inclination within you? That no one speaks about. I know many schools that speak about, social justice. But how about the 10 Commandments? Do not steal, do not lie, do not commit adultery. What about those commandments? Fighting the bad in you. No one speaks about that. And it's disheartening to me, because really that's where the work begins. It doesn't end here, but it begins here. Yeah. And if we can really control ourselves and master ourselves, then we'll be able to master the world. But God was telling us after the rainbow that Yetzer Lev Adam Ra min Orav, that you have an evil inclination. So begin here. And maybe the generation of the flood, or the generation before the flood, maybe they were all into bettering the world. Maybe they were all into social justice, maybe. But they forgot the evil in here. So God brings the flood, and God tells them, sorry, it begins here. Yetzer Lev Adam Ra min Orav. Remember, you have an evil inclination. First conquer this, and then go out to the world. Because without conquering this, you won't be able to change the world whatsoever. Your message will be fragmented. Your words will be broken. Your impact will be very short-living. And that's really the message of the rainbow in my eyes. Yes, it's God's reminder, but it's also a reminder for us that it starts within. And if we can then control the evil inclination within, then there won't be a need for a flood. It's almost like, just put it this way. I mean, I think that if everyone was successful in conquering the evil inclination within, there wouldn't be a need for police forces. The reason there's police, and we do need the police, I'm not here to advocate for defund the police, quite the opposite. But the reason there is police is because people can be social justice oriented, but what about here? What about here? And it's unfortunate that that's not spoken about enough. We don't speak about that in schools enough, that I know. But it's something to take into consideration after reading about the rainbow and God's message. Yeah. Rabbi Eisen, it's a story I mentioned yesterday in my sermon. Rabbi Eisen was the one who made me aware of it. But it's a very humorous story that occurred last week, and about a Turkish man from a northwestern town in Turkey. I think the town's name is Indigo. Inigo or something like that. And he went out to drink late at night with a bunch of friends in the forest. And he decided to leave his group and go back home, but he was drunk and he fell asleep in the forest. In the meantime, his wife is realizing that her husband didn't come home, so she calls the police and says, my husband is missing. And all of a sudden, you have many search teams that are searching for this man. He wakes up in the middle of the night and realizes there's search teams all around looking for a missing man. So he says, I'm going to join the search team. True story. Looking for a missing person. And then it wasn't until someone shouted his name, Beitun Mutlu. Beitun Mutlu, Beitun, where are you? Then he realized, gosh, they're searching for me. So he said to them, hey, hello, it's me. And they didn't believe him at first, and then they did, and they wanted to find him, but they let him go. But the point is that this story, which is a true story, again, that happened last week on Tuesday, is a metaphor for life. Sometimes we go searching, we go out to the world, and we engage ourselves in good deeds, search committees, search teams. But we forget that really it begins within. We have to first find ourselves. Mm-hmm. And then once we find ourselves, then sometimes there's no need at all for those search teams. Or maybe the mitzvah of bettering the world then is channeled in a different direction, a more effective one, certainly. But that's the idea. Okay. All right, let's continue. Page 169 at the top. Unless again, there's more comments, more than welcome. Okay. So who wants to read? 169. Now this goes into deep Kabbalistic stuff.
I'll be happy to read. Rabbi.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you. Go for it. Note.
So this is the note. To be sure, there are contained in it the 10 sephirot of the holy world of action, as is written in Eitz Chaim, Portal 43, and within these 10 sephirot of the world of action are the 10 sephirot of the world of formation, and in them the 10 sephirot of the world of creation, and in them the 10 sephirot of the world of emanation, in which abides the light of the blessed infinite. Thus, the light of the blessed infinite pervades this lower world through being clothed in the 10 sephirot of the 4 worlds, namely those of emanation, creation, formation, and action, as explained in Eitz Chaim, Portal 47, Chapter 2, and in Sefer HaGilgulim, Chapter 20.
Right. So, again, this just speaks of the process of what is also called in Kabbalah Seder HaIshtalshelut. The way Seder means the order of the drawing down, or the drawing down of God's light. So until God's light gets to this world, it is condensed 4 times, really. There are 10 sefirot in the first world, in the world of emanation, that carry God's light, that go through the 10 sefirot of the world of creation, the 10 sefirot of the world of formation, and then 10 sefirot of this world, the world of action. So it goes through this condensation process 4 times. So therefore, you can imagine that this light is much, much more condensed than the light that is more revealed in upper worlds. And this explains also why, therefore, evil has more say in this world, because the light of God is not as revealed as it is in upper worlds. I was just reading yesterday, just something in Kabbalah, which was fascinating to me. I never knew this, but part of the reason, for example, speaking of the evil that is in this world, it's not just people that are evil. It's not just evil altogether, but I think it's also this contraction of light, right? That we just explained, that enables evil to prevail, and in a way turns us into limited people. It turns our view of God also into a limited view. But I was just reading yesterday that, for example, the righteous who live really, even while they're in this world, they live in upper worlds. Their eyesight is much wider. It's not blocked by the evil that exists in this world. Sometimes there are things that we can't see in this world. For example, we can't see souls. Why? because the light of God is contracted in this world so much that our vision, therefore, is also contracted, our godly vision. And the body blocks the soul, so we can't see souls. Yet the righteous who continue to live in upper worlds, even though they exist in this world, they can see souls. And their vision is not as contracted because they really stayed, mentally speaking, spiritually speaking, in other worlds, even though they live in this world. Now, part of this vision is, for example, being able to see the future. It says, I was reading the Baal Shem Tov, for example, wrote to his brother-in-law almost everything that would happen to him and things that really happened, almost as if he was a real fortune teller, not a fake one, but a real psychic. And you know, the Kabbalistic sources were asking, how did he manage to do that? It says, because here in this world, our vision is contracted, but in the world of formation, which is the world just above this one, then we can see 15 years in a span of just a few moments. And that's because, again, there's no blockages to that vision. So 15 years, one can see it almost like in a picture. You can see it. And the higher you go in the upper worlds, the more years you can see. But you know, it's just a nice Kabbalistic notion. But again, it just points to the fact that because God's light is so contracted in this world, as explained in this note, so is our vision. But if we're able to see things in this world the way we see them in the world of formation, our vision will be entirely different. It will be much more clear, unblocked, and all-encompassing, maybe. That's just an example to explain what he's saying here through the 10 sefirot of each world and the light that travels through them. Okay, let's continue maybe with the commentary again, unless there's any notes. Commentary of Rabbi Stans on this note, as explained earlier. Jordan, you want to continue?
Yeah, sure. As explained earlier, the existence of anything, including Kalipa and Sitra Achra, can only derive from one source, from God, from the light of the infinite himself. The difference between holiness and the mundane lies only in the amount of layers of concealment that shroud the divine essence of a thing. This is determined by the number of steps the divine light has descended along the chain of the evolution of the worlds, as described in the passage from Eitz Chaim cited in this note.
Right. So I was just rereading the memoirs of Elie Wiesel recently, and I would encourage everyone to read them. It's a 2-volume book, and they're named. The names of the memoirs are really after a verse in Ecclesiastes that says that all the rivers run to the sea. That's volume 1. Volume 2 is, and the sea is never full. So, that's the verse. Now, in his memoirs, he speaks, there's a lot of Hasidic tales. He himself was a Vishnitzer Chassid, Chassid of the Vishnitzer group. He grew up as a Vishnitzer Chassid, a very Vishnitz family in a Vishnitz village in Sighet, Hungary. I think Sighet right now is in a different country. The border changed so many times, but maybe Romania. There he tells the story of a madman who, not a madman, sorry, that's a different story. He tells the story of a man who was told by his rabbi that the way he can change his village is if he would go to his bar, to the local bar of his village each and every day and shout to them to return to Hashem. Stop wasting your time and drinking yourselves to oblivion, but return to Hashem and return to Hashem. And he would do that, and it didn't help. People would think that this guy's crazy. So after a while, he went back to his Rebbe and he said, Rebbe, but shouting to my bar, like you told me, the people in my it's not helping me. And the Rebbe said, you think I'm doing this for you to change them? I'm doing this for you to remain who you are. So that you remember the truth. If you wouldn't shout, then you would assimilate with them. So in order for you to remember the truth, you have to sound that voice of truth time and time again. Even though no one's listening to you, at least you're listening to yourself, and that keeps you anchored. But in a way, I think this is what this is saying, that's why it came to mind, that unfortunately, when God's light is so contracted in this world, so it gives a lot of room for people to waste their time and to drink themselves to oblivion and do all sorts of other things. But if we know the truth and we're connected to the truth, then we have to sound it. Sometimes it makes an impact on the world. Sometimes it makes an impact just on ourselves. The famous line that is quoted very often is that words that come out of the heart enter the heart. And it was a great Hasidic master, Rabbi Meir of Premishlan, who would say, enter the hearts of who? Words that come out of the heart enter the heart of who? So most people will tell you of the listeners, people that are listening to your words. Rabbi Meir of Premishlan says, no, of the ones saying those words. If you say things that come out of the heart, they will enter your heart. And at least it will keep you connected and sane. But in a way, this idea that there could be people drinking themselves to oblivion in a bar, to use that metaphor, that example of Elie Wiesel, is because, again, God's light is contracted. And it's not as revealed. If it was revealed, then no doubt people would stop doing these things and immediately connect. But that's the world we live in, and we have to continue shouting that message, voicing the voice of light and the voice of truth.